The announcement email arrived on a Monday morning in late March. Subject line: Leadership Transition, Technology Department. I opened it expecting routine organizational updates. What I got was notification that I was being replaced. Effective May 1st, Alexandra Chen will be joining Horizon Systems as Director of Technology Infrastructure. Alexandra brings extensive experience from her previous role at Cloud Tech Solutions and will be leading our infrastructure modernization initiatives. Current Director Vanessa Carter will be transitioning to a Senior Technical Advisor role to ensure knowledge transfer and strategic continuity. Senior Technical Advisor. Corporate speak for we're demoting you, but making it sound like a lateral move. I'm Vanessa Carter. I've been Director of Technology Infrastructure at Horizon Systems for 7 years. I built the department from 3 people to 18. I'd migrated our entire infrastructure to the cloud. I'd implemented security protocols that had prevented multiple breach attempts. I'd managed a $12 million budget and consistently delivered projects on time and under budget. My performance reviews were excellent. My team was solid. Our systems ran smoothly. There was no obvious reason to replace me beyond the fact that I was 49 years old, and Alexandra Chen was probably in her early 30s based on her LinkedIn profile. The email continued: Vanessa will be working closely with Alexandra during the transition period to ensure comprehensive knowledge transfer. Please join me in welcoming Alexandra to the team. Translation: Train your replacement, help her succeed, then accept your demotion quietly. I forwarded the email to my husband, Marcus, with a note: They're replacing me, making me train her, calling it a transition. His response came immediately: That's age discrimination. Have you talked to an attorney? Not yet. But yes, this feels like age discrimination dressed up as reorganization. I scheduled a meeting with our CEO, Richard Morrison, for later that day. He'd hired me 7 years ago and had always been supportive. I wanted to understand why this was happening and whether I had any recourse. Richard's office, 3 p.m. He looked uncomfortable before I even sat down. Vanessa, I assume this is about the announcement. Richard, why am I being replaced? My performance is strong. The department is running well. I've delivered everything that's been asked. What's the justification for bringing in someone new? This isn't about your performance. The board wants to bring in fresh perspectives and new approaches to infrastructure management. Alexandra has experience with cutting-edge cloud architectures and modern DevOps practices that align with where we're heading. I've been managing cloud infrastructure for 5 years. I've implemented the DevOps practices we currently use. What specifically can Alexandra do that I can't? Richard shifted in his chair. It's not that you can't do the work. It's about positioning the company for the next phase of growth with leadership that reflects current industry trends. Leadership that's younger, you mean? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Alexandra is what, 32? I'm 49. This is about age, and we both know it. Vanessa, I'm offering you a senior technical advisor role. That's not a demotion. It's a strategic position that leverages your expertise without the administrative burden of management. It's a demotion with a prettier title. And you're asking me to train my replacement. Do you understand how insulting that is? I need you to help ensure a smooth transition. Alexandra is talented, but she doesn't know our systems or our history. Your knowledge is invaluable. If my knowledge is so invaluable, why are you replacing me? Richard didn't have a good answer for that. Am I being given a choice? I asked. Can I refuse the senior advisor role and stay as director? The decision has been made. Alexandra starts May 1st. You can transition to the advisor role, or we can discuss a separation package. There it was. Accept the demotion and train your replacement, or leave with whatever severance we offer. Before I tell you what happened next, I need you to understand something about this moment. This wasn't just about a title change or hurt feelings. This was about a company forcing out experienced leadership without justification, using age as the unspoken reason, and expecting me to facilitate my own replacement. If you've ever been told to train your replacement, if you've ever been pushed aside for someone younger despite strong performance, if you've ever been told you're being transitioned to a role nobody wants, stay with me. Because what happened when Alexandra Chen started working with me wasn't what Richard expected. And it definitely wasn't what the board expected. My name is Vanessa Carter, and I'd spent 7 years building a technology infrastructure department that was the backbone of Horizon Systems operations. We're a healthcare software company, about 300 employees, providing electronic medical records and practice management systems to medical clinics and hospitals. I wasn't just competent at my job, I was excellent. Under my leadership, we'd had 99.8% uptime, 0 major security breaches, successful migration of 15 legacy applications to cloud infrastructure, implementation of disaster recovery, systems that had been tested and verified multiple times. But I was also 49, which apparently made me less desirable than a 30-something with fresh perspectives. The pattern had started about a year ago. Richard had hired a new CFO, Daniel Park, who came from a Silicon Valley startup background. Daniel immediately started talking about modernizing leadership and bringing in digitally native perspectives. Over the past year, 3 senior managers in their late 40s and 50s had been pushed out and replaced with people in their 30s. Each time, the justification was about fresh thinking or new approaches or aligning with industry trends. Each time, the person being replaced had strong performance records and years of institutional knowledge. And each time, they were expected to train their replacements before leaving. Now it was my turn. Alexandra Chen started on May 1st. Her first day, I met her in the conference room for what Richard called an initial knowledge transfer session. She was 33 according to her bio. Stanford, computer science degree. 6 years at various tech companies, most recently at a cloud infrastructure startup. Smart, confident, carrying herself with the assurance of someone who'd been recruited specifically because companies thought youth equaled innovation. Vanessa, thank you for meeting with me, Alexandra started. I know this transition must be difficult. I want you to know I didn't seek out this role to replace anyone. I was recruited, and they told me, you were voluntarily moving to an advisory position. I appreciated the honesty. They told you I volunteered for this? Yes. Richard said you wanted to step back from management responsibilities and focus on strategic, technical work. That's not accurate. I was informed I was being replaced. The advisory role is a demotion I'm being forced to accept. Alexandra's expression changed from professional friendliness to something more guarded. I didn't know that. They definitely framed it differently to me. I'm sure they did. But let's be clear about what's happening here. I'm 49 years old with excellent performance reviews. You're 33 with impressive credentials. I'm being replaced not because of performance, but because the board wants younger leadership. That's age discrimination. But it's hard to prove and expensive to fight. If that's true, I'm uncomfortable with this. I don't want to be part of pushing someone out unfairly. You're not pushing me out. The board is. You're just the person they chose to replace me with. That's not your fault. But I want you to understand the situation you're walking into. What do you want me to do, right now? Learn the systems. Understand the department. Let me show you what we've built and how it works. Then you'll be equipped to make your own decisions about what you want to do. Over the next month, I trained Alexandra thoroughly. Not grudgingly or minimally, I gave her full access to everything. All our documentation, all our architectural diagrams, all our policies and procedures. I introduced her to the team, walked her through each person's strengths and responsibilities, explained the dynamics and relationships that made the department function. I showed her our disaster recovery plans, our security protocols, our vendor relationships, our budget management processes. I walked her through the history of major projects, what had worked and what hadn't, the lessons we'd learned over 7 years of building this infrastructure. And I also showed her the problems. The technical debt we'd been managing. The systems that needed upgrading but hadn't been budgeted. The security gaps that I'd been requesting resources to address, but had been deprioritized by leadership. Alexandra was smart. She picked things up quickly, asked good questions, and started seeing patterns. 3 weeks into her tenure, during a systems review meeting, she asked me a question that suggested she was starting to understand the bigger picture. Vanessa, I've been reviewing the security audit from last quarter. You flagged 17 critical vulnerabilities that need remediation. Why haven't these been addressed? I requested budget allocation for the fixes. Daniel Park denied the request, saying we needed to focus resources on new product features rather than maintenance. But these are critical vulnerabilities. If any of these get exploited, we're looking at potential HIPAA violations, data breaches, regulatory fines. I know. I escalated that in my request. Daniel's position was that we've gone this long without incidents, so the risk is acceptable. That's insane. You don't accept critical security risks just because you haven't been breached yet. I agree. But that's the decision leadership made. Alexandra was quiet for a moment. Did you document these escalations? Yes. I have emails to Daniel and Richard outlining the risks, requesting resources, and noting that denial of those resources puts the company at significant risk. Can I see those emails? I showed her the documentation. 6 months of escalations about security vulnerabilities, infrastructure maintenance, technical debt remediation. Each escalation clearly explaining the risks. Each one denied or deprioritized. Vanessa, if I'm taking over this role, I'm inheriting all these documented risks. If something goes wrong, it becomes my responsibility even though the problems existed before I got here. Correct. That's not acceptable. Why would they replace you but not give me resources to fix the problems you've been flagging? Because fixing the problems costs money. Replacing me with you saves money. You're probably being paid less than I was. I'm making $135,000. I was making $168,000. So yes, they're saving $33,000 annually by replacing me with you, while inheriting all the same unresolved infrastructure problems. Alexandra looked genuinely angry. They recruited me into a setup. They're dumping documented technical risks on me, paying me less than the person who was managing them, and expecting me to magically solve problems they wouldn't fund solutions for. Welcome to the modernization strategy. Why? Cut costs by replacing expensive experienced leadership with cheaper young talent, then expect better results with fewer resources. This is bullshit. Yes. But it's legal bullshit mostly. Hard to prove age discrimination when they can point to your impressive resume and claim they're bringing in fresh perspectives. Over the following weeks, Alexandra and I developed an unexpected alliance. She wasn't just learning the systems, she was understanding the political and strategic context. She saw how leadership made decisions, how resources were allocated, how genuine technical risks were dismissed in favor of short-term cost savings. And she started questioning whether she wanted to be part of it. 6 weeks after starting, Alexandra came to my office and closed the door. Vanessa, I need to tell you something. I've been approached by one of your former team members, Rebecca, with a concern. She said she's been contacted by 3 recruiters in the past month, all representing tech companies in the area. The recruiters seem to know a lot about our infrastructure projects, and specifically asked if she'd be interested in senior engineering roles. Recruiters target people at successful companies all the time. But these weren't generic inquiries. They knew specific details about projects Rebecca worked on. They knew our technology stack. One of them specifically mentioned that several senior engineers from Horizon have recently joined their companies, and that they're building a strong team of Horizon alumni. That was interesting. Which companies? TechCore Solutions, DataBridge Systems, and one startup called Nexus Health. Do those mean anything to you? TechCore is where Marcus went. He was our senior security engineer pushed out 6 months ago. DataBridge hired Patricia, our former infrastructure architect. And Nexus was started by Jennifer, who was VP of engineering before Daniel Park pushed her out. So, there's a pattern. Leadership is pushing out experienced people, and those people are either joining competitors or starting competing companies. Apparently. Vanessa, I have a question. If you weren't locked into this advisor role, what would you do? Honestly, I've been thinking about it. Marcus has been asking if I'd want to join TechCore. Jennifer reached out about consulting for Nexus. I've had offers, but I've been hesitant because walking away felt like letting them win. What if walking away wasn't letting them win? What if it was setting yourself up for something better? What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that maybe I shouldn't be here either. They recruited me to replace you, but what they're actually doing is setting me up to fail. They're giving me your documented risks, fewer resources than you had, and expectations that I'll somehow do better. That's not a career opportunity. That's a trap. So what do you want to do? I want to learn everything you can teach me about infrastructure management, team building, and navigating corporate politics. Then I want to make a decision about whether I'm staying at Horizon or looking for opportunities where I'm not being set up to take the fall for leadership's poor decisions. You've only been here 6 weeks. 6 weeks is long enough to see a pattern. You didn't fail as director. You were pushed out because you were too expensive and too old. But the problems you were managing are still here, and now I'm supposed to solve them with less money and less support. I'm not stupid enough to think that's going to end well for me. What does that mean for the next few months? It means I keep learning from you. I keep documenting the resource requests that get denied. I keep building relationships with the team. And when I'm ready to make a decision about my future, I'll make it from a position of knowledge rather than naive optimism. 3 months after Alexandra started, I got a call from Jennifer at Nexus Health. Vanessa, we're growing faster than expected. We need to build out our infrastructure team. I want to offer you a position as VP of Infrastructure. You'd be building the department from scratch, setting the technical direction, and working with a team that actually values experience. What's the compensation? $185,000 base plus equity. You'd be coming in early enough that the equity could be significant if we're successful. That's $17,000 more than I was making at Horizon. And you'd be doing work you're actually qualified for, rather than pretending to be an advisor while training your replacement. Jennifer, I'm in an awkward position. I'm technically still employed by Horizon. The advisor role doesn't end until September. And I've been training Alexandra, who's actually become someone I respect and don't want to leave in a bad situation. What if Alexandra came with you? I blinked. What? We need a senior infrastructure engineer. Alexandra has good experience, she's been learning your systems. And based on what I've heard from Rebecca, Alexandra is smart enough to see that Horizon is a sinking ship. Would she be interested in joining a startup that actually invests in infrastructure? I don't know. But I can ask. That afternoon, I pulled Alexandra aside. Hypothetically, if you had an opportunity to join a fast-growing health tech startup, working with experienced leadership who'd been pushed out of Horizon, would you be interested? Is this hypothetical, or are you actually asking? I'm actually asking. Jennifer at Nexus Health just offered me a VP position. She asked if you'd be interested in a senior engineer role. Alexandra was quiet for a moment. What would that mean for Horizon? It would mean they'd lose both of us simultaneously. You'd have been here 4 months, I'd be leaving my advisor role early. They'd be scrambling to figure out infrastructure leadership. Vanessa, I've been here long enough to see how leadership operates. They pushed you out. They're setting me up to fail, and they're doing the same thing to other departments. I don't have loyalty to a company that treats experienced people as disposable. So that's a yes? That's a tell me more about the opportunity. Over the next week, Alexandra and I both had conversations with Jennifer. Alexandra would join as senior infrastructure engineer with a clear path to director within a year. I'd come in as VP, building the infrastructure department from scratch. We'd both be working with people who'd been pushed out of Horizon, Marcus in security, Patricia in architecture, Rebecca in engineering. A team of experienced professionals who were tired of being undervalued, and were building something new. 2 weeks later, Alexandra and I submitted our resignations on the same day. Me, terminating my senior advisor role 4 months early. Her, leaving after 4 months as Director of Technology Infrastructure. Richard Morrison called me into his office within an hour. Vanessa, what is this? You're both leaving. Yes, we've both accepted positions at Nexus Health. Alexandra just started. She's barely gotten up to speed. She's learned enough to see the pattern of how you treat experienced people, and realized she'd be next on the replacement list in a few years. That's not true, Richard. You've pushed out 6 senior agers in the past year, all in their late 40s and 50s, all replaced with people in their 30s. You're saving money on salaries, while losing institutional knowledge and setting up the new people to fail with insufficient resources. Alexandra is smart enough to see that game, and she's choosing not to play. I can't have you both leave simultaneously. The infrastructure transition isn't complete. Then you should have thought about that before replacing me. You asked me to train my replacement. I did. I trained her so well that she understood what was actually happening and made her own decision about where she wants to work. I can offer you your director position back. Same title, same salary. No. Vanessa, be reasonable. I'm being completely reasonable. I'm taking a VP position at a company that values experience, working with a team of talented people who were pushed out of here, building infrastructure for a company that's growing. Why would I stay at Horizon to be senior advisor reporting to whoever you hire to replace Alexandra? What about Alexandra? Can I talk to her? You can try. But she's already accepted her offer at Nexus. Alexandra's meeting with Richard lasted longer than mine, but the outcome was the same. We were both leaving. Our last day would be in 2 weeks. The exit interviews were perfunctory. Our asked standard questions about our reasons for leaving. We gave standard answers about new opportunities and career growth. We didn't mention age discrimination or being set up to fail, or the pattern of experienced people being pushed out. Well, that would have been satisfying but pointless. We were moving on to something better. My last day at Horizon was a Friday in July. The infrastructure team threw a small goodbye lunch for Alexandra and me. Several people mentioned that they'd been contacted by recruiters recently and were considering other options. The pattern was continuing. Leadership was pushing people out, and those people were leaving voluntarily before they could be forced out, taking their knowledge and relationships with them. Nexus Health turned out to be exactly what Jennifer had promised. A fast-growing startup with leadership that valued experience and invested in infrastructure. Over the next year, we built a strong technical foundation, implemented security protocols that actually got funded, and created systems that could scale. Alexandra thrived in the environment. Within 8 months, she was promoted to Director of Infrastructure Engineering. The leadership path that had been promised to her at Horizon, but undermined by inadequate resources and political dynamics, became real at Nexus. 18 months after leaving Horizon, I got a call from Rebecca, who was still there. Vanessa, thought you'd want to know. Horizon is having major security issues. They got breached last week. Stolen patient data, potential HIPAA violations, the whole disaster you warned them about. The vulnerabilities I flagged before I left? Exactly those? The ones Daniel Parks said were acceptable risks that didn't justify budget allocation. Turns out they weren't acceptable. Horizon is facing regulatory investigations and potential multimillion-dollar fines. Who's running infrastructure now? They hired someone after Alexandra left. He lasted 4 months before quitting. Then they hired someone else who's been there 3 months and is apparently already looking for other jobs. The department is a mess. People keep leaving. Nobody wants to inherit all the technical debt and risk. That's unfortunate. Vanessa, people here talk about the Nexus effect. How everyone who got pushed out of Horizon ended up at Nexus or companies founded by former Horizon people. And how those companies are thriving while Horizon struggles. You've become a case study in how not to treat experienced employees. 2 years after leaving Horizon, I was speaking at a Women in Technology conference. My session was titled Age, Experience, and Value, Navigating Career Transitions. 2 years ago, I told the audience I was forced out of a director position I'd held successfully for 7 years. I was told to train my replacement, a talented younger woman who'd been recruited specifically to take my job. The company expected me to facilitate my own replacement and then accept a demotion. What they didn't expect was that my replacement would be smart enough to see the pattern, recognize she was being set up to fail, and choose to leave with me instead of staying to take the fall for leadership's poorer decisions. Today, I'm VP of Infrastructure at a thriving health tech startup. My replacement is now a director, thriving in an environment that values her skills. And the company that pushed us out is dealing with the exact infrastructure disasters I'd warned them about, plus a talent drain as more people realize they're better off leaving. Here's what I learned. When companies push out experienced people for being too expensive or not fresh enough, they're making a bet that expertise doesn't matter. They're wrong. Expertise matters tremendously. And experienced people have options. We just have to be confident enough to pursue them. If you're facing forced retirement, unwanted transitions, or pressure to train your replacement, remember, you're not trapped. Your experience has value. And sometimes the best response to being pushed out is to take your expertise somewhere it's actually appreciated. After the talk, a woman in her late 40s approached me. Ms. Carter, I'm in exactly the situation you described. I'm being transitioned to a senior advisor role while training someone 20 years younger. Did you ever consider legal action against your former company? I consulted with an attorney. Age discrimination is illegal, but it's hard to prove when companies can point to legitimate business reasons for changes. Bringing in fresh perspectives sounds reasonable, even when it's a euphemism for replacing expensive older workers with cheaper younger ones. But I didn't accept being pushed out without moving on to something better. I took my expertise to a company that valued it. That's not giving up. That's recognizing your worth and finding people who see it. What about your replacement? How did you get her to leave with you? I didn't get her to do anything. I trained her honestly and thoroughly. I showed her both the strengths of what we'd built and the problems leadership wouldn't address. She's smart, she saw the situation clearly, and made her own decision about where she wanted to build her career. The company thought they were replacing me with someone more malleable. They got someone who was just as capable of recognizing bad leadership. 3 years after leaving Horizon, Marcus and I attended a tech industry dinner where we ran into Daniel Park, the CFO who'd been behind the modernization strategy that pushed out experienced employees. "Vanessa, Marcus," he said with forced cordiality, "I heard you both ended up at Nexus. How's that going?" "Very well," I said. "We're at 150 employees now, growing profitably, building technology that's competing directly with Horizon's products." "Good for you." "And Alexandra? I heard she left with you." "She's thriving. Director of Infrastructure Engineering, building systems the right way with proper resources and support." Daniel nodded, looking uncomfortable. "I'll be honest, the transition at Horizon has been rougher than we expected. We've had turnover in infrastructure, and the security breach last year was expensive. The breach from the vulnerabilities I flagged before being pushed out. The ones you said were acceptable risks, we've made significant investments in security since then. After the breach cost you tens of millions in fines and remediation, probably more expensive than it would have been to just fund the fixes when I requested them. Perhaps. But we're moving forward with new leadership and new approaches. Good luck with that. Though you might want to reconsider the new leadership strategy if it keeps resulting in experienced people leaving to build competing companies. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, I want you to understand something. This isn't about revenge or proving people wrong. It's about recognizing your value when others don't, and having the confidence to take your expertise where it's appreciated. When Horizon made me train Alexandra, they expected her to be loyal to them and grateful for the opportunity they'd given her. What they got was someone smart enough to recognize that replacing experienced leadership without addressing underlying problems was a setup for failure. Alexandra didn't owe them loyalty just because they hired her. She owed it to herself to make smart career decisions based on what she observed. And what she observed was a company that undervalued experience, underfunded critical infrastructure, and set up new leaders to take the fall for problems they inherited. We both made the right decision to leave. And Horizon's ongoing struggles with infrastructure, security breaches, and talent retention suggest they're still learning the expensive lesson that expertise matters. If this resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe. Share your experiences in the comments about training replacements or leaving companies that didn't value your contributions. Those stories help others find courage to recognize their worth. Remember, they made me train my replacement, expecting loyalty while pushing me out. I trained her fully and honestly. She saw the truth about what they were doing and chose to leave with me instead. They definitely didn't expect that.